So it's been 3 days since I recorded, and a lot of stuff's happened. Peach's mom is not coming to visit after all. She got sick, and even though she got better, I just don't want to risk it. Also, it's not good for Peaches. Um, I have been dealing with a lot of Peaches having health issues and stuff. I mean, she flat out had a complete and total, like during raids, when I'm supposed to be leading raids. Um, I couldn't talk to the raiders. I couldn't do call outs. I couldn't do anything. We were just trying to sort of follow stuff. I played a little worse because I was distracted. But you can't turn anything on when stuff's happening. And I had a breakdown. That happens sometimes. I get so completely exhausted from constantly caretaking that I just have a major panic attack and literally break down and devolve into a fetal position, uncontrollably sobbing and unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything. Um, I just get so exhausted trying to be patient all the time, trying to tiptoe around her moods all the time. I and it's not her fault. She has a billion reasons to have this much health problems. It's just you can love someone completely and you can understand, and it still is just so hard. You can't have a conversation with her without her freaking out. And um, most people don't have to deal with the freakouts. They get to talk to her and she seems nice and sweet and stuff. And then afterwards, I handle the freakout. I remember when I was writing books and stuff, I got a very part time job doing some babysitting and stuff, but it was enough to pay bills. It was enough to pay very, very frugal bills. I mean, we lived very frugally, but, you know, it did. It was enough. And I could take Peaches because she's not allowed to work, but also I didn't want to leave her alone. Back then, I could leave her alone for like 5 hours. I didn't want to leave her alone for like a solid 8. So I would bring her with me and she'd just take a nap or, play Legos with the kid every once in a while I was, playing with Legos with them or something too, or play Play Doh too, stuff like that. Like, she honestly slept half the time, at least, um, which is pretty normal for her because some of her medications make her sleep. So, um, but as her health devolved, um, after a year and a half or so, she couldn't come anymore. She just couldn't, but that meant I couldn't work anymore. She was terrified of children. She couldn't handle it. She just had constant like breakdowns, and she didn't start out scared of children. She started out liking children. So it was this switch, but she also was getting super Alzheimer's-y. Um, she would get non-functional to the point of not even being able to speak, and like she would try to make some sort of like that to try to explain that she's trying to say something or ask for something, constantly choking, having seizures, just couldn't hardly walk, couldn't hardly do anything. And she went from being rather high functioning to a certain degree to completely helpless, like a solid 98% of the time, um, in the course of less than 2 years. And I had to take care of her. And we went to specialist after specialist. We went to thing after thing. The neurologists saw all this stuff, and they finally sent her to 8 hours straight of neuropsychologist testing, like an entire day of just nonstop testing. And when we went in the room, you know, I had up to that point been just way past my threshold of able to just nonstop take care of another human being as if they're as helpless as like a 1 year old. Like I had been working my butt off to do that. I had dropped everything else in my life. Everything was consumed with her care. Everything. And I was so hopeful. I was like, okay, we're going to get officially what's wrong. We're going to get a solution. There's going to be, like treatment. There was so much hope that maybe, just maybe, there'd be a way around this or something. And he sat down and he said, well, the good news is she's not dying and it's not Alzheimer's. But, and as soon as he said that, I knew. And I just started sobbing uncontrollably. And I could see the confusion in his face. And he's like, she's not dying, and that's not what it was. I didn't want her to die, obviously. I wanted there to be some sort of treatment. His butt led to that she has the most extreme case, and this guy had like 6 or 8 degrees up on his wall from nice places like Brown and freaking one of them was it Stanford? Anyway, there was a bunch of them, and they were not from like community college, whatever. And here's this guy explaining to me that she could be like this for the rest of her life. She needs a very specific kind of specialist that insurance will probably never cover in the state we lived in, and that she could get somewhat better with some training and stuff, but she's gonna need like aid care and she's gonna need this stuff, but she's not gonna die. She's gonna be okay, but she's gonna require a ton of work. And him saying that to someone who had already worked themselves and already given up everything else in their entire life, so hard for someone. I he finally got to the point where he was like, well, thanks for coming, because I could not stop sobbing. I walked out of that building sobbing. I wasn't safe to drive for at least another half hour. We just sat in the parking garage with my spouse going, ooh, 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 and me sobbing. Like, my girlfriend was going to college and she's going to go in New York. And New York was one of the very few states where insurance might cover a specialist. My spouse's insurance, as in Medicaid, provided through her SSI, so I got rid of everything I owned that didn't fit in our car, and we drove 3,000 miles to come to New York, and I called and called and called around until I got her the specialist, and it's been years, but the specialist is helping. Peaches is a lot less Alzheimer-y. The majority of the time she's at least able to speak and communicate and things like that. She's never going to be like a normal person or whatever. Not just because of this particular disorder, but she has so many other disorders, and I mean just flat out autism. But it gets very hard. It gets very long, and no day is consistent, and I get exhausted, and it doesn't matter that I love her. It doesn't matter that I think she's a good person, and sometimes we have genuine fun hanging out together. You have to like hold on to those moments and memorize them and take some pictures to remind yourself the rest of the time that they happen. sometimes because it's hard. You have to be doing chores, washing dishes while also talking her down. You have to be taking care of another human being while also taking care of everything at the same time. You can't. I was looking at for the last couple of days, I've had some hope that maybe I could get like some sort of a remote job and do something, like if you go to Amazon and go down to careers and you look at remote jobs and then you scroll down a little ways and hit work from home, there's like 1,100 jobs or something like that. I thought, well, maybe I could learn another language and become a transcriptor, or, I had all this hope about, well, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. And they would expect a certain amount of hours every day that I could work, and some days I could do that, and some days I could. The other thing is that when I went to college, I went to freaking leadership school. Well, okay, it was a Christian leadership school because at the time, I was still decently indoctrinated or whatever. And so I have this nearly worthless associate's degree, right? Well, I did learn a lot of things that were very beneficial to self-discipline and, how to stay motivated to doing things and stuff that was like, some of the stuff they try to scam you into with self-help programs and courses and going to speaker stuff and blah, blah, blah. Um, that whole system is pretty toxic and scammy. It's great to read a book or to go to a course or whatever and feel like a surge of adrenaline and motivation to do something. It's great. If you then actually do something, you actually change a habit, you actually go get motivated. But instead, they take advantage of that vulnerability and encourage you to buy the next book, to go to oh, I learned so much from this guy. So you buy that guy's book and he's like, "Oh, I learned so much from this guy." I mean, it's one of the fastest growing multi-billion, industries in this country is self-help and web seminars and watching all these people's YouTube channels where they just say the exact same thing over and over again. And a lot of it's very scammy. But there are nuggets in it if you're willing to be aware of the scamminess and to actually take action when you glean something. And I found a dude that my baby brother really likes, and I was like, I should watch one of his things or two, make sure my brother's not getting brainwashed yet again by yet another thing. And thankfully, the dude doesn't seem super brainwashy, so thank goodness for that. He actually was pretty open about not wanting to be part of the scam that is self-help industry. So, yay, that's something. Anyway, he was talking about some stuff, and I was like, I know all of this from when I went to college, and I used to do all of this. And I thought about when did I stop doing this stuff? And it was when my spouse's health went into the shitter. Before then, I actually did all this stuff, and I actually did it with my spouse, and we were decently happy because we had like this positive thing we did together and these like good habits that we were investing in, and we had like a plan for life, and we were going to get married and we were going to travel and we were going to do this stuff because she'd never seen anywhere in her life because she'd always been, special needs. So people just always kept her locked away so that she would always be safe and never feel vulnerable. But that also means she never seen anything in her entire life. Like, the most she's ever traveled ever was with me. And her parents moved 3 times to 3 different states. And it still is like she's never seen like anything. And I was going to take her to Yellowstone. We were going to go to Disney World. Like, there was all this stuff. And of course, the world's biggest ball of yarn because she likes stuff like that. She likes weird stuff. We were going to do all this stuff, and her health went to crap. Like, just complete crap. And we couldn't do any of it. And they flat out told me, don't travel around with her like this, like 98% of the time, Alzheimer's. She had very few moments of lucidity, and now she's lucid the majority of the time because of working with a specialist for several years. So that's something. But it's like, we were doing stuff that builds you up, and I realized I gave up on everything. When that guy was telling me that, it wasn't just that I was already so overworked. It wasn't just that I was so overstressed. When you love somebody and they're suffering all the time, it hurts. It's traumatic to constantly take care of them, to have to rock them back and forth while they wail or cry uncontrollably. They put their hands over their ears and they just moan, and you don't know how to help them. All you can do is just rock them and hope it gets better. And eventually they come out of it, and you just hope it's temporary. And it's hard. It's very mentally, emotionally, physically, all of it just hard. But even more than that, when that doctor was talking to me, he was damning me for the rest of my life to this. I was doomed. There was no point to anything anymore except just her care. Everything else just disappeared. I stopped writing. I stopped making videos. I stopped everything. If it wasn't for her help, I didn't do it. I've been trying to find myself and all that shit with the whole considering trans stuff thing. But there's more to me than being trans. And I made a gaming video for the first time in like more than 2 years yesterday about how not to get a Brutosaur mount, because I got the Brutosaur mount in World of Warcraft and people are obsessed. And it reminds me a little of the scamminess that is the self-help system. But basically, I made a video and then I put in the comments how to get the Brutosaur. But like, I haven't made a gaming video in so long, like of any kind. And it wasn't the best gaming video ever, but at least I made one. I used to make guides and crap for games because I genuinely like that. I used to make silly little... I remember when I very, very first started out, and I would just make, like, slideshows or whatever. Like, I've never been the best video editor or video maker or whatever. Like, it's not like some hidden talent of mine. It's just for getting out of my negative headspace and feeling mildly creative for a little bit. Like, it's healthy to do things that don't revolve around everything else going on in your life sometimes. People like to say, video games are this massive waste of time. But the people who say that are probably also people who think self-care is somewhat a waste of time. People who embrace like hustle culture and if you're not working, if you're sleeping a full 8 hours a day, you're, gonna be behind the rat race. You're gonna be behind the next guy who's only sleeping, 5 hours and he's getting more done than you. Like, they're just, if you work hard enough, if you work long enough, if you do it more enough, you'll get ahead of everyone else and you'll make it there and blah 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 blah. When in reality, it's mostly luck and recognizing an opportunity when it arises and actually capitalizing on that opportunity, and then that luck, you can just ride it for the rest of your life. Um, for instance, one dude was super open and honest that I saw in a video recently, and he's like, yeah, I'm not better than anyone else. I just happen to be further ahead than you, but I am not worth more than you or more valuable than you or anything like that. I made a YouTube video when I was younger. I still make money off that YouTube video now. Like, I made some videos and they went viral, and I just capitalized on the viralness. And that's all I did to be successful. If you can magically get lucky enough to have a viral video, congratulations, you can capitalize on that and become successful maybe. But you have to get lucky enough in the first place. And, think about how many millions and millions of people are making videos on YouTube. And then think about how many, maybe 5 videos a week go truly viral. Like, it's like selling lottery tickets to people. You show off these images of these couple of people getting all this success because they got lucky, and they try to convince you that everyone's going to get that lucky someday if you just keep buying the ticket. And I don't make YouTube videos to go viral or to get my ticket or whatever. I make them for myself and to help people. That's it. But yeah, I've been trying to look at ways to make things better, to get back into good habits that I used to have. I used to write down my goals. I used to actually have goals, and I used to like think about what are the stepping stones to that goal. What's the thing I need to do to get there? And I still actually do that a lot. It's just my goals are, okay, these are the things that need to be done to survive the day. Like, hey, dishes need done. Like, trash needs taken out. I gotta go clean the bathroom. All right, let's do some laundry. Like, do this stuff while tiptoeing around someone who's unfortunately not in a stable place right now in their life. And hoping you can get as many chores done as possible, while taking care of that someone. So maybe, just maybe, there's a little bit of like playtime at some point where you can actually just play instead of being responsible for guild officer crap. Where things could actually just be fun. I've been sneaking onto ESO just to play just a little tiny bit, just every once in a while, because, that gets me away from the guild and it gets me into a fun environment with a lot more detailed graphics. And, you don't have to pay for a subscription. And for me, that's huge. And every once in a while, I do get the subscription for just a short little bit so that I can deposit everything into my bags and start over again. But that means it's super cheap. If you're paying $15 like twice a year, ain't no biggie. And then I use in-game gold I save up in-game gold, and I'll be like, hey, I'm gonna buy this DLC, or hey, I'm gonna, unlock this. And what I do. But I like exploring, I like collecting the things in it, going around. I like the new antiquity system. It's basically everything that archaeology should have been and wasn't. Like, the antiquity system's actually fun for me. I like finding treasure chests. I like going around and discovering all the places and finding the sky shards and the lore books and all that stuff. Like, I find it like fun, and I feel like I'm, adventure or whatever. My first boy characters I ever made in a video game where, I didn't have to actually play a boy character because they were a boy already in, like, a computer um, RPG, or like, League of Legends, where some of the people you pick are going to be guys. Like, one of my favorites ever was Maokai. Maokai's a boy. Anyway, I don't even know if he's still in that game. I haven't played League of Legends in like 8, 9 years. I don't know. It's been a while. Um, anyway, you know, I made boy characters because I wanted to make boy characters, because I actually felt safe enough to make boy characters. Um, and I did that just, a few months ago. Like, that was a big deal to me, to feel safe enough to actually make a boy character. Um, I don't have but one boy character in all of World of Warcraft still, because the guys are all really cartoony looking and a little warped looking because of that. Like, they almost look like caricatures or something, where their features are exaggerated or whatever. Um, so I don't really like the look of any of the guy characters, except maybe someday I'll make like some guy blood elf or something. I don't know, but I already have like 3 blood elves, so do I really want another one? Like, anyway, I made a little boy Volpera, but I haven't leveled him yet because I already was leveling something else. So until I finish leveling that, I'm not leveling the next character. Anyway, it's like, I don't know. There's no time for stuff that's personal. Like, I didn't get any Mythic Pluses in last week at all, so I have no chests. I can't do quests. I can't do like any of the leisurely playing in WoW. It's just nonstop officer stuff, and I agreed to be an officer. I agreed to do all of this. It's actually part of my spouse's therapy to help her develop some social skills for her to be a guild leader, and I'm helping facilitate that. Um, I'll do anything for my spouse. I love my spouse. I would do anything for her. But I'm trying to start thinking about ways to do at least a couple small, tiny things for me. And I realize they won't be every day. Some days, it's just not possible. That's just life. But I would like to write down goals. I would like to actually pursue them. I would like to actually stop believing everything that I could ever want is just unrealistic. I've been defeated for a very long, long time. Just completely defeated. I don't want to go into being a man being automatically defeated. Like, that's just not what I want. Oh, I told the girls I want to start having an accountability system where we actually say stuff that we want to accomplish, and then at the end of the day find out if we did, and we'll reward that. I think, that's important. People are like dogs. We like treats too when we do something right, like, and the treats don't have to be food. The treats can be other things. I started reading a book with the girls that I know helped Peaches in the past with some of her relationship with her parents, but she forgot everything when Alzheimer's disease, she lost so much of her life, and I'm slowly trying to integrate it back into her life. And I try to remember, no matter how hard it is for me, it's harder for her. There are times she just weeps and weeps because she's so frustrated with being unable to understand things, or so frustrated with feeling dependent, so frustrated with feeling like struggles. Like, my goal, transitioning, seems pretty big, and her goal, being able to get dressed by herself, seems pretty small. But I know how huge that is of a goal for her, because I'm the one who dresses her. Because I'm the one who knows what happens when she tries to get dressed by herself most of the time. She gets hurt, she gets stuck, she gets scared, she freaks out, caught inside of her shirt or something. Like, tries to put on pants and just falls. Like, that's a huge thing for her. And to have the sense of independence that, hey, I can change my clothes whenever I want. That's a huge thing. I can't imagine not being able to do that. And how frustrating. Like, her entire life must just be non-stop grief and frustration. And that's what my life's like. It's just different goals. We're just frustrated about different things some of the time. I have not gotten a lot of sleep over the last few days. Basically none. So, sorry if I'm a little weird. My birth mother sent me this thing about how Christians, she was like, this is my heart. This is how I feel. I'm not trying to hate on you. This is how I genuinely feel. And she sent me this thing, and it's basically how Christians shouldn't hate LGBT. They should have pity on them because the LGBT are floundering so much for an identity, and they're having a giant identity crisis. And that's why they're LGBT, is because their identity isn't in God, and that's their identity crisis. And they can't stop having the identity crisis until Christians start, guiding them back or whatever and stuff. And I was just like, so I responded with a video. Uh, I'll link it. I've been linking whenever I say that I'll link it, so I'll just link it. That I've linked before, but I'll link it again, of the trans little girl in Texas and the Christian mom and stuff. And I said, this is my response. Being a Christian and caring about LGBT people are not exclusive to each other. And I flat out told her, I think you're so religious that you think it would be preferable that I had committed suicide rather than grow up to be who I am, despite that I am a person of upright character. I didn't say, although it is true, the only major identity crisis that I've had in my life, besides the one I had with losing my whole life to my spouse's illness, the only other major identity crisis I had was growing up and trying to reconcile who I was and who my mother would consider to be her kid. The biggest identity crisis I've ever had in my life, worse than the identity crisis that I am still struggling with this health stuff. The biggest identity crisis I've ever had in my entire life was trying to be her kid. I was constantly suicidal, trying to force myself into that freaking box. And she knows for a fact that I was suicidal and she doesn't give a damn. She didn't care enough to get her kids out of abuse, to stop showing her kids abuse. She still to this day prays for my soul and thinks that that means she's a good mother. She thinks she's a good mother. But I don't have an identity crisis about it anymore. I did not initiate being estranged from her. She actually initiated that because she didn't want me telling my baby sister all the things that we experienced, because my baby sister was hitting her teens and getting old enough to know some things. And she didn't want that to happen, so I just was cut out of the life. Completely. Wasn't allowed to talk to my sister about anything at all, or to them, period. Just knocked right out of their life. And at first I was really hurt by it and stuff, but honestly, the years and years of no contact was some of the best years for my mental health. Like, if I had been trying to take care of my spouse and having to deal with my birth mother, I would have died. There is not a slight shred of doubt in my mind. I would have died. Probably one of the best things that my birth mother ever did for me in my whole life. And she has done a few good things for me. She genuinely done. She taught me how to budget and be frugal. We had bank accounts, like by 11, that were ours to access. We had little saving account thingies before that. But like she taught me about money and budgeting and being frugal. Super appreciate that. That served me a lot in my life. Like, genuinely a good thing that she did. She's done good things before. But you don't judge a photo album by the one or two pictures that are looking good if almost all the pictures in the photo album are blurry or red-eyed or, off focus, angled in a weird way. If the majority of the pictures in the album suck ass, the album sucks ass. And there might be one or two good pictures in there, but the overall result is still a bad photo album. Same thing is true of people. I don't judge people by making one mistake. I look at patterns of behavior. If you're doing it over and over and over again, if you're doing it to this day, when you are way too old to act that immature, my mother is rigidly not open to changing. At least in all my experiences with her. I haven't looked at her response to the video, but I can already tell you what it's going to be. Oh, well, in recent times, Christians have become more open to these things, but back when you were a child, no one would have accepted it. I would have been judged harshly by all the other Christians around me for accepting you, and I would have had to deal with that before God. Something to that effect. It might not be those exact words, but that's what it's gonna be. Like, for real. And the thing is, why does it matter what all the other Christians are doing? It matters what you're doing. It matters how you're treating your kid. It matters what you're actually studying and looking at. I don't care what the other people were doing. I didn't live with them. You might have the slightest hint of a point if you can say, oh, I didn't even know it was possible to be a Christian and have an LGBT plus kid that you accepted. Maybe you were just flat out ignorant. But I know for a fact that's not true, because when I was 19 and I came out, one of the first things I did was explain the realities of Christianity and LGBTness, which is actually that there's no issue. None at all. Divorce, lying, being jealous, prostitution. I have read the Bible in so many different versions. I went on a 4-year kick of studying nonstop. I even went and got a freaking Greek and Hebrew translator for the Bibles, trying to understand what I was reading in the original Greeks and Hebrews. Like, went all out the origins of the entire religion, which are not exactly correctly portrayed, but that's a whole other thing. I don't want to destroy someone's religion if it is edifying to them. It literally nowhere in the entire Bible actually says anything against people being homosexuals at all. It's completely mistranslation. The only thing that is slightly not mistranslation is in Leviticus, and it was actually a set of rules for the Levites in specific, because they were managing the temple and they had to be unique. Most of the laws in the Old Testament were to set the Israelites apart as a unique people amongst the other peoples, and then the unique person amongst these unique peoples needs to be even more unique, and it was the Levites. It was a law to separate them from everyone else, because they were so obsessed with procreation, and they could not have the people who are in charge of the temple not procreating and making more priests to be in charge of the temple. The law didn't actually apply to everybody else. The 1 Corinthians crap that people like to recite, no, that word does not mean homosexual. If in every other Greek document it means a prostitute who would have sex with anyone of any gender, it just means a prostitute who would have sex with anyone of any gender. The closest thing it means is bisexual prostitute, like at the very closest. In reality, the Bible was once again against prostitution, because prostitution spread disease and spread their bloodline out, and they were very big on keeping their bloodline locked to their own culture. That's why if you're born of a Jewish dad and not a Jewish mom, you're not actually considered Jewish according to Orthodoxy Judaism, because the mom is what proves that you're Jewish, because it's verifiable, your bloodline, if it comes through your mom. Because having the pure bloodline is so important, because that's what saved Aaron in the flood. But blah, 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 blah. Anyway, all of it is very, very culturally based. Go look back in history before the Crusades at like the monks sending each other romantic letters, at the bigger acceptance, there was a lot more acceptance of homosexuality before the Crusades. Part of the reason why was there was nothing against homosexuality in the actual Bible. The Bible has been retranslated so many freaking times. Like, even like the Bible that, quote unquote, Jesus would have used is completely different than the Bible that even Charlemagne used. Because Charlemagne thought a lot of the stuff, like from the book of Enoch and things like that, that were originally part of the Bible, it wasn't called a Bible back then, but whatever. He thought that was spooky, and he was like, I'm not sure how I feel about all these angels and stuff. Let's knock a bunch of this stuff out because it's really like, not useful anyway to getting people to respect their leaders and live a solidly virtuous life. Back then, they genuinely believed that if you weren't scared of a deity, you wouldn't do the right thing. You don't actually need to have an invisible someone watching your every move to do good things, to be an upright person. But every once in a while, there's people that they wouldn't do upright things in society unless they thought they were being watched. For instance, we have cameras everywhere now, and look at all the people getting caught doing stuff. And they only start doing something better once they realize they can get caught. Because there's cameras everywhere. I am so glad there are cameras everywhere. Personally. Good. Get that pedophile. Get him. Get that person who's beating the F out of someone simply because of the color of their skin. Get him. Video everywhere. Keep things honest. Very for it. The current modern Bible does not read at all like the original documents. And the original documents, I think the author was trying to say exactly what the author was trying to say in the original documents. I mean, original Hebrew didn't even have a word for homosexuality. That's how little they cared about homosexuality. They did not give a damn. It didn't matter to them. Was not important. Like, the Greek stuff, like, is just pure mistranslation. Intentional mistranslation, by the way, if you look up it historically. Look up the history of the Bible. The modern day Bible, totally not the Bible. And even the modern day Bible gets like picked, and people just choose the verse that they want to read, and then they totally knock off the context around it. They're like, oh, Romans 1, and then don't read Romans 2. Romans 2, where it literally starts going on about how God judges people by the law written on their heart and not the law that's in the words of God anymore. If they're doing the right thing and they do it of their own accord, they're just as much going to heaven as you are. Romans 2. Go read it. Go on. Like, go get educated about the religion you supposedly believe in. Stop listening to some guy on a pulpit talking out his ass and go actually learn. Oh my gosh, I realized why I was scared of being sold as a slave when I was a child. I realized what it is. There is a myth that the Irish were sold as slaves. And you can go Wikipedia it. It's literally called the Irish slavery myth. Just go Google it. Go ahead. It exists. And I can guarantee you, my mother probably told me all about it when I was a kid. Probably did. Would not shock me or surprise me in any way. There's a few big giant holes in this myth. Okay? And I saw one of the people on my own freaking friends list post about Irish slavery, and I was like, I'm Irish. Allow me to explain to you why this isn't true. Ha! And on the one hand, there's some gray area there, and horrific things definitely happened to the Irish, and most of it was because the Brits hate the Irish. It's just a giant thing. Ever since the Anglo-Saxons went and settled on the Isles, and the Vikings stopped selling the Irish in slavery. The Irish and the Brits just went boom, 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 and they have to this day. They just do. They ain't friends. It is what it is, which is so sad because I love, love, love the British Isles. Like, probably my favorite place on the entire planet is the British Isles. But that's also including Ireland. I would love someday to go see the land of my ancestors, but that may never happen. But I would love that. Anyway, freaking Irish slavery is attributed to a bunch of stuff where the Irish were almost genocided in population by a lot of crap that went on. There was war, there was some famine, and there was a lot of indentured servitude where people were kidnapped and dragged across the world to the new colonies and made to work there and shit. But there's some significant differences. First of all, people like to say, oh, look, the poor Irish slaves, and they post photographs with it of these people looking miserable. All of this happened before photography was invented. Anyone who posts a thing about Irish slavery and it's got a photograph of these miserable looking people, it's clickbait. It's fake. It's false. It's probably some white nationalist propaganda trying to destigmatize the African American slavery. Okay? It's a picture of the Holocaust, most likely. Seriously. Secondly, the thing about Irish slavery is freaking, yes, they were discriminated against. Yes, they were mistreated. Yes, a bunch of them died from the brutality that they received. Yes, it was miserable. But a bunch of them did volunteer into that misery because they wanted a free ride to the New World across the Atlantic. They actually signed contracts, a ton of them. A ton of them didn't get the option to sign a contract. They got just ripped from their families. But a bunch of them did volunteer into it. You could have the option to choose it. There aren't African American slaves who had the option. Okay? Third thing is there were a bunch of Irishmen selling African American slaves. Do you know why that was possible if there were also Irish slaves? It's possible because even on the ledgers where Irishmen were called slaves, which there are a couple, the Irishmen who were being sold were considered humans. African Americans were not considered humans. Hear that again. There's a big difference. Now, when we got to the colonies where we mistreated crazy amounts, hells yeah, but there's a lie going around that a bunch of African American guys got to rape all these Irish women, and that ain't true. Your owner got to rape you. And it didn't matter if you were African American or if you were Irish, your owner just would rape you. That was just the truth. Also, sorry to anyone who's triggered by the word rape, but it is a thing throughout history. The biggest thing is while people from Ireland, some of them didn't get a choice, and they were dragged there, and they were forced to work, they were forced to starve, they were forced to get beaten, they were forced to be raped. While these things were happening to them, and they didn't get a choice in the matter, they eventually were freed. You could work 6 to 9 years or whatever it was, and then walk away as a free man. Now, you're going to still get some discrimination. You might still get treated a little bit like a dog or get the worst jobs, but you were a free man. You could own land, you could have a house, you could start a family, you could do whatever. African Americans were slaves for life. And only a couple of them could work their way so far as to try to buy their slavery away. And it took them a lifetime. Most of the indentured servitude of the Irish, even the involuntary servitude of the Irish, lasted less than a decade. And while there's a gray area, because technically some of the Irish would have been considered slaves because they didn't get a choice in the matter during that time, It was not an Irish slave trade the way that it was with the African Americans. Black people suffered such other kinds of horror. And was it okay what happened to the Irish? Absolutely not. It's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. But it's not the same thing. Filtering down and toning down the horrors of what happened to Africans being dragged to America and forced to become African American against their will and tortured their whole lives is not the same. That's like saying, oh, well, the people in the Holocaust, obviously, there's been other people who suffered in the world and struggled, and they were hated on it for being different, and it's just the same thing. Do you know how many Jews were murdered in concentration camps in the most horrific ways you can imagine? Starving, struggling, just desperate, being harmed in every way, tortured. It's not the same thing. And yes, there's hundreds of years of discrimination against the Irish, but there's also so much more racism against the blacks. And that's from an Irish person. Yeah, my people haven't had it the greatest. But if we're going to play the who's life's worst game, and I hate that game, but if we're going to play it, let's be honest. Nowadays, the Irish can blend in with pretty much everything else in the United States of America. There's a few people who go on about how we're drunks and we're angry, and oh, look at that. Especially if you're red-haired. Oh, you poor redhead, you. But that's it. It's not the same. Anyway. There's a lot of history that people like to contort and twist. People like to make it look how they want it to look. And people do that with the Bible constantly. They want it to look how they want it to look. Well, I believe that if you read a book written by anybody, it means what the author intended it to mean. And that includes the Bible. It doesn't mean what's convenient for you. If I freaking read Lord of the Rings, if I freaking read Wheel of Time series, if I freaking read, anything, something Piers Anthony, Anne McCaffrey, J.K. Rowling, whatever books I'm reading, it means what the author intended it to mean. There's people who like to argue The Handmaid's Tale with the author of The Handmaid's Tale. It means what she meant it to mean. Don't argue that it means something totally different because that's what would be convenient for you. It means what the original author meant for it to mean. Don't accept the mistranslations of a book and be like, yep, this is the one that I believe in. This is the one that's true. The one that's true is the one that's the closest as possible to what the original author wrote, so that it means as close as possible exactly what the original author wanted it to mean. And that's every book of the Bible. That's every book ever written on the face of the world. I've been working my butt off over the last few days. I've been trying really hard, and I've also been very exhausted and had a complete breakdown. I have gotten almost no sleep, and I'm still me. Even completely exhausted and broken down, I'm still a person who believes in honesty and uprightness and being good to other people, being honest about other people, being honest about how you've been to other people, or even about history. Being honest about history is important. I, I don't stop being me. I stop having as much patience. I stop having as much energy. I stop having as much of a threshold for things. You know what's really interesting? Is this entire time that I've been so exhausted and mentally and emotionally and physically drained and everything else, I haven't once doubted that I'm a guy. I'm still me. If anything, I'm more solid every single day about it. Like once I had some breakthroughs about that I could be a good man, once I got rid of a bunch of the guilt about being a man, it was a lot less hard for me to accept. And it's not that I didn't know that I've always been of a male mind. It's it's just it's interesting to me that even at my most like broken, I'm still a guy. I watched a very interesting thing. If you ever go on YouTube and you watch the Psy Guy thing about um, transgenderness, uh, which I'm not even sure if transgenderness is a word, but whatever. Um, explanations about like hormones and like the science that we have thus far explaining a lot of the things going on and stuff. It's very interesting. Um, my girlfriend, one of her sisters, is one of the people who does studies and stuff on brains because of cancer reasons, and is very known for it. Actually, she's published papers that people use for all kinds of stuff. But she said that her sister refuses to ever put in any report that it's a man's brain or a woman's brain because the characteristics that are usually quote unquote you get enough of them and you can say, hey, this is probably a guy brain, hey, this is probably a girl brain, are too common in both kinds for you to just automatically write off and say that's a guy's brain, which I found very interesting that in the science thing that they were also saying the same thing um, for the United Kingdom. In Britain, gender dysphoria is not the same as in the United States of America. In the United States of America, it's in the mental health handbook thing. And in the United Kingdom, it's apparently considered a medical condition and not a mental health disorder, um, according to more than one British person that I have gotten that information from. So um, that's interesting to me. The recommended treatment for being transgender is transition. But transition looks differently for different trans folks. Like some don't get surgeries at all, some just socially transition, but maybe some get a top surgery, but they don't get bottom surgery, or vice versa, or however it works. It's not very often vice versa, but honestly, if I had to choose between, it would be vice versa for me. Weirdly, which I know that's so weird because how do you pass? But at the same time, what would alleviate the most panic attacks and dysphoria in my own life would be that. So what would be best for my mental health, despite that it would make it harder to pass, would be that. Crap, now I'm thinking about... Anyway, I probably will have a panic attack at the end of this video. Yay me! The big thing is, they were talking about hormones and how much hormones influence things and stuff, and how much so many characteristics are possible between a quote-unquote woman or a quote-unquote man, and your testosterone levels and your estrogen and progesterone and all that stuff all affect so much stuff. I'll put a link to the video if I ever make this, but it was all very, very interesting, and I knew a bunch of it, like a bunch of it. I even knew about shark skeletal structures, more like a ton of what they said I already knew, but it still was interesting seeing it expounded upon. And people are so rigid about gender, and it doesn't make any sense because our own freaking bodies inside are not rigid about gender. There is a difference between sex and gender, but at the same time, you're born in the womb when you're developing all of that stuff. Until you hit puberty, your body doesn't fully bloom into something. And my body bloomed into a little bit weirder of something than some people's, but I mean, honestly, there's lots of bearded ladies in the world, there's lots of guys with boobs in the world, and people just like to dismiss them. Dismiss the people who are the exception because they want there to be a rule. There's not a rule. I've been fed a lie my life, and I don't want to keep trying to fit into what will make my parents comfortable. And maybe I should have realized that sooner. I mean, I'm a grown-ass adult, whatever. But the biggest identity crisis I've ever had was trying to be a good child. To be an acceptable child to my parents. The most miserable I've ever been in my life. More miserable than even breaking down. Sobbing uncontrollably in a fetal position, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to hardly breathe. Completely, like, just broken. And even still, I'm not killing myself. I'm literally not making any attempts. And I was then. I literally would lay staring, unable to even cry, staring into the darkness in my room, staring at the wall for hours upon hours upon hours. Didn't sleep. Insomniac. If I did sleep, horrific nightmares that make you wake up screaming. No matter how exhausted and no matter how quote-unquote broken I am now, I'm still better off than I was then. Just trying to be the kid that they wished I was instead of who I was. And if there's anyone who's watching this and you're still trying so hard to get your parents to love you or to be proud of you or to want you, to like you even. Just to like you, even if they can't love you. Learn from my mistake. I'm 35 years old and look at how much I've wasted my life consumed with nothing. Someday, maybe, just maybe, there could be a way for me to have the body that I wish I could have. To have the say in my life that I wish I could have, I can start now. So I'm going to start going back to my old habits that were more self-disciplined. Self-discipline creates energy because it gets rid of some of the waste, the excess. I'm starting to see myself more as a man. It's difficult still to look at myself for more than a few seconds, but I more consistently can. And that's self-discipline. And when I can, I look for the things that, are a little more masculine. A lot of times I look at my hairline because I got a more square hairline instead of a round hairline. I somehow got lucky with that. Although that means that I may very well end up balding when I go on testosterone someday, but I look at my beard a lot. Having something to focus on that's not wrong helps. Sometimes I look at my eyes, but my eyebrows are really thin, so that affects me some. So I try not to look at them. But I am starting to get more disciplined, and with that comes a little bit of like feeling stronger because I'm facing things that I have ran from my entire life about myself. But until you accept where you are and what's wrong with it, you can't move forward somewhere else to something that doesn't have those wrong things. It's hard not seeing a man when I look at myself. So hopefully that's temporary. And maybe temporary means years, but temporary is still temporary.